Hello, Robs. Back with new book arrivals number 242. We doing it live, dog. And since I'm not YouTube polished, purposely so, because I don't really give a fuck, we are going to set it up how I feel like it. 242. Save. Okay. Right, Bob, how do I turn this off? Right, Bob. There we go. Now I can't see nothing. All right. First book, which I've already got, maybe several copies. Neil Gaiman's Gay Man, as I call him, The Graveyard Book. NG, Neil Gaiman. You can see it's rather sunny out today, even though it's ice cold. The Graveyard Book with illustrations by Dave McKean. 2008. First edition. I mean, it's Sans, the dust jacket, but what's that got to do with me? Oh, look at these illustrations. These are just wonderful. The weird thing to me is people are so easily pleased by just mediocre art. Like this is just boring. I mean, look at it, it's terrible. The knife had a handle of polished black bone, and a blade finer and sharper than any razor. If it sliced you, you might not even know you had been cut. Not immediately. The knife had done almost everything it was brought to the house to do, and both the blade and the handle were wet. The Fire Cat. And I Can Read a Book by Esther Averill. I believe that I already have this book, but it's in great condition, only 50 cents. What can you do? Story and pictures, Esther Averill, 1960. But something tells me that it's later since there's a zip code on Columbus. Pickles, the Fire Cat, the old tree. Once upon a time, there was a yellow cat with black spots in his fur. His name was Pickles. Pickles was a young cat. His paws were big, and he wished to do things with them. But where could Pickles find anything big to do? He couldn't, bruv. He couldn't. Famous American Negroes by Langston Hughes. The glare on this dust jacket is outrageous. Does this say TABA Social Studies Program? This is a generic author biography book, I believe. Phyllis Wheatley, whose poetry George Washington praised. Richard Allen, founder of the African Methodist Episcopal Church. Ira Aldridge. Obviously, everyone knows Douglas and Tubman and Booker T. Washington. I don't know who Daniel Hale Williams is. Oh, there's more. Henry Ossawa Tanner, George Washington Carver, Robert S. Abbott, Paul Laurence Dunbar. He would be ostracized for beating his wife. At least today he would be. Back then, not so much. Look at that. Sad looking motherfucker. Obviously, it has Mylar, famous biographies for young peoples. Echoes Through Time, World War II and the North Woods by Greg Coudray. And there's Greg looking all transed up. Main reason why I got this is because it is a Michigan book and it documents his time, his 20,000-mile odyssey from the small cabin on Tawas Lake in northern Michigan is the backdrop for Army hijinks. Anyway, the point is he was from Tawas, and that's where Gundella the Witch was from, born in, and there are anecdotes that he writes. I don't know if these are diary entries or what, but these may feed into my researches. I'm a lifelong bachelor. Ma and Minnie raised 6 children on a small farm in the early decades of Michigan's 20th century. Her husband, Walter, died shortly after the birth of their last child. Great. The Mill on the Floss by George Eliot. And this glare on this. One of the shockingly few sunny days in Michigan in the winter. Great illustrated classics. Obviously a mass-produced sort of book. But it does have a library pocket, so I'm good with that. A lot of people don't like library books, but I mean, I'd rather have the non-library edition, but I also like pockets. This is a local one, Van Buren Public Schools. Mill on the Floss. And this story, and that's Tessa D'Urberville's, set in England and first published just a century ago. I can't even read. Why am I fucking... Set in England and first published just a century ago, the charm of this great novel of domestic realism lies chiefly in the magic by which the commonplace lives of the Gleggs and the Tullivers are transformed into lively pictures full of vital appeal. What year was this released? 50s? 60s, so that book must have been written in the 1860s. What do you mean? What the fuck? Why do people have to comment on stupid shit? T.C. Boyle, Water Music, 25th Anniversary Edition with a new introduction. Wasn't a fan of T.C. Boyle, but I keep collecting his books. What was his one big book? The one that became a popular movie. Is this an English edition? I think it might be, bro, which would be why I have not seen this edition. Is it? No, printed United States. What's the essence of this? Funny body full of T.C. Boyle's inimitable flights of imaginative and stylistic fancy. Water Music, his first novel, follows the wild adventures of Ned Rise, thief and whoremaster in Mungo Park, explorer through London's seamy guttas and Scotland's scenic highlands to their grand meeting in the heart of darkest Africa. There they join forces and wend their hilarious way to the source of the Niger. Exciting. The Mystic Quest, an introduction to Jewish mysticism, which will go great. I really wish to stop, ignore me. The fuck are you? Or do you want me to stop and ignore you? Stop Ignore Me. Prove No 9. 1988 by David S. Ariel. The Nature of Mysticism, the History of Jewish Mysticism, Living with the Abyss, the Hidden and the Revealed, the Calculus of the Divine World, the Shekinah, the feminine aspect of God. This work is the product of a 15-year study of Kabbalah, to which I was introduced by Professor Asher Finkel at New York University. My studies continued at the Hebrew University. In the last 2 centuries, Jews have often discounted the presence of a persistent mystical tradition in their midst. Although there have been powerful mystical movements in Judaism since antiquity, modern music was a fine read indeed. You think so, bruv? Let's see what we got. Let's start the first chapter. T. Corrigan Boyle. Introduction. Apologia, as the impetus behind water music is principally aesthetic rather than scholarly. I've made up use of the historical background because of the joy and fascination I find in it, and not of a desire to scrupulously dramatize or reconstruct events that are a matter of record. I've been deliberately anachronistic. I've invented language and terminology. I've strayed form and expanded upon my original sources. Where historical fact proved a barrier to the exigencies of the invention, I have, with full knowledge and clear conscience, reshaped it to my purpose. Water music. I wonder if this was named after Bukowski's Hot Water Music. Soft white underbelly. At an age when most Scotsmen were lifting skirts, ploughing furrows, and spreading seed, Mungo Park was displaying his bare buttocks to Al-Hajj, Ali ibn Faturi, Emperor, Emir of Ludamar. The year was 1795. George III was dabbing the walls of Windsor Castle with his own spittle. The notables were botching things in France. Goyle was deaf, De Quincey a depraved pre-adolescent. George Bryan Beau Brummel was smoothing down his first starch collar. Young Ludwig van Beethoven, beetle-browed and 24, was working them in Vienna with his piano concerto No. 2. And Ned Rise was drinking Strip Me Naked with Nan Punt and Sally Seabum at the Pig and Pox Tavern in Maiden Lane. Ali was a Moor. He sat cross-legged on a damask pillow and scrutinized the pale, puckered nates with the air of an epicure, examining a fly in his vicious soie. Is that vicious soie? A fly in his vicious soie. His voice was like sand. Turn over, he said. Mungo was a Scotsman. He knelt on a reed mat, trousers around his knees, and glanced over his shoulder at Ali. He was looking for the Niger River. Turn over, Ali repeated. Well, the explorer was congenial, and quick to please, his Arabic was somewhat sketchy. When he failed to respond the second time, the Saud, Ali's henchman, and human jackal stepped forward with a lash composed of the caudal appendages of half a dozen wildebeests. The tufted tails cut the air, beating on high like the wings of angels. The temperature outside Ali's tent was 127 degrees Fahrenheit. The tent was a warp and woof affair, constructed of threads spun from hair of goats. Inside it was 112. The lash fell. Mungo turned over. Here, too, he was white as sheets in blizzards. Ali and his circle were astonished all over again. His mother dipped him in milk, someone said. Count his fingers and toes. Shouted another. Women and children crowned the tent's entrance. Goats bleated. Camels coughed and coupled. Someone was hawking figs. 100 voices intertwined like a congeries of footprints, walks, low roads and high roads. Which one to take? And still, in Arabic, mystifying, rapid, harsh, the language of the prophet. La 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 la, a woman shrieked. The others took it up, an excoriating falsetto. La 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 la. Mungo's penis, also white, shrank into his body. Well, that's cute. Back to the Mystic Quest. I'll admit that was pretty good writing, but the topic itself is banal, shall we say? Banal. I wonder if they mention what's his name in here? Trachtenberg. What's his name? Jason Trachtenberg. I wonder if he's in here. Guessing he is, because why wouldn't he be? We got any Trachtenberg? Trachtenberg's in the back. I will be quite happy, but he's not, so kind of ruins that whole appeal of this book. Oh, let me see if I can reach this bullshit. Joshua Trachtenberg, that's who it is. I was hoping, I do plan on reading this book on this channel at some point, but no. Does it have a barcode? It does. Santeria from Africa to the New World. The Dead Cell Memories by George Brandon. A compelling and coherent description of the processual development of Santeria. I know of no other work that describes the development of a major stream of African American culture in such a detailed way or in such historical depth. It's kind of like voodoo, isn't it? Anybody? Someone? Santeria, isn't it voodoo? The old religion. Check page 9. Page 9. A complex web of political interaction, trade, and cultural influence. All right, I don't know. I don't know what Santeria is. Basically, my knowledge of Santeria comes from that one song. What's that Sublime song? Courage to be disliked. Ichiro Kishimi and Fumitake Koga. The Japanese phenomenon that shows you how to change your life and achieve real happiness. Desire for recognition makes you unfree. Youth, look, I have been dissatisfied for ages. The adults of the world tell the young people, do something you like to do, and they say it with smiles on their faces, as if they might actually be understanding people, as if they were on the side of the young, but it's all lip service, which comes out only because those young people are complete strangers to them, and the relationship is one that is completely without any kind of responsibility. Then parents and teachers tell us, get into that school or look for a stable occupation. And this concrete and uninteresting instruction is not merely an intervention. It's actually that they are trying to fulfill their responsibilities. It's precisely because we are closely connected to them and they are seriously concerned about our future that they can't say irresponsible things like, do something you like. I'm sure you'd put on that understanding face shoe and say to me, please do something you like, but I won't believe such a comment from another person. It's an extremely irresponsible comment, as if one were just brushing a caterpillar off one's shoulder. And if the world crushed that caterpillar, you would say, it's not my task, and walk away nonchalantly. What separation of tasks, you monster. Philosopher, oh goodness, you're getting all bent out of shape. So what you are saying, in other words, is that you want someone to intervene to some extent, that you want another person to decide your path. Youth, sure, maybe I do. It's like this. It's not so difficult to judge what others expect of one or what kind of role is being demanded of one. Living as one likes, on the other hand, is extremely difficult. What does one want? What does one want to become? And what kind of life does one want to lead? One doesn't always get such a concrete idea of things. It would be a grave mistake to think that everyone has clear-cut dreams and objectives. Don't you know that? Appreciate your, what is this bullshit? Water, music, rendition. Thanks. Right. The secret architecture of our nation's capital. The Masons and the building of Washington, D.C. Washington. Oh, look at this bullshit. That's the Illuminati motherfuckers taking over. The funny thing about people who are like, you people really believe someone's controlling the whole world. And then they go to a job where like people are micromanaging their entire existence for 8 hours. And then everywhere you go, someone's micromanaging you, but not in the big picture. Those are just kindly servants trying to help you along and have a civilized society. Meanwhile, society deteriorates rapidly. Then you wonder why, bruv, all of this is planned. Obviously, there's crossroads and such, but yeah. The secret architecture of our nation's capital. Today, there are more than 20 complete zodiacs in Washington, D.C., each one pointing to an extraordinary mystery. David Ovison, who has studied these astrological devices for 10 years now, reveals why they have been placed in such abundance in the center of our nation's capital and explains their interconnections. His richly illustrated text tells the story of how Washington, from its foundation in 1791, was linked with the zodiac, with the meaning of certain stars, and with a hidden cosmological symbolism that he uncovers here for the first time. Fascinating and thoroughly researched, The Secret Architecture of Our Nation's Capital is an engrossing book that raises provocative questions and offers complex insights into the meanings behind the mysterious symbols in Washington. Pretty cool little book. It's not really little. It's what, 400 pages? 500 pages. Holy fuck. It's the rhyme, bruv. Look at these bastards. Look what they've done to us. Lila, An Inquiry into Morals by Robert M. Pirsig. As I stated a week or two back when I found a paperback copy of this, which I'd never heard of before. Obviously, Pirsig is the guy who wrote The Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, or whatever the fuck it's called. This, I believe, is a novel, even though it has the appearance of a philosophy book. Lila didn't know he was... Oh, Lila's a dude? What? Lila didn't... Oh, okay. Lila didn't know he was here. She was sound asleep, apparently in some fearful dream. In the darkness, he heard a grating sound of her teeth and felt her body suddenly turn as she struggled against some menace only she could see. The light from the open hatch above was so dim it concealed whatever lines. I like this sun line over here. Oh, look, it's basically controlled by this. It's like a sundial, bruv. The light from the open hatch above was so dim it concealed whatever lines of cosmetics and age were there, and now she looked softly cherubic, like a small girl with blonde hair, wide cheekbones, a small turned-up nose, and a common child's face that seemed so familiar it attracted a certain natural affection. He got the feeling that when morning came, she should pop open her sky blue eyes and they should sparkle with excitement as the prospect of a new day of sunlight and parents smiling and maybe bacon cooking on the stove and happiness everywhere. But that wasn't how it would be. When Lila's eyes opened in a hungover daze, she'd looked into the features of a gray-haired man she wouldn't even remember. Someone she met in a bar the previous night. Her nausea and headache might produce some remorse and self-contempt, but not much, he thought. She'd been through this many times, and she'd slowly try to figure out how to return to whatever life she'd been leading before she met this one. Her voice murmured something like, "Look out!" Then she said something unintelligible and turned away. then pulled the blanket up around her head, perhaps against the cold breeze that came down through the open hatch. The berth of the sailboat was so narrow that this turn of her body brought her up against him, and he felt the whole length of her, and then her warmth and earlier lust came back, and his arms went over her, so that his hand held her breast, full there, but too soft, like something overripe that would soon go bad. He wanted to wake her and take her again, but as he thought about this, a sad feeling rose up and forbade it. The more he hesitated, the more the sadness grew. He would like to know her better. He'd had a feeling all night that he had seen her before somewhere a long time ago. That thought seemed to bring it all down. Now the sadness came on in full, and blended with the darkness of the cabin and with the dim indigo light through the hatch above. Up there were stairs framed by the hatch opening so that they seemed to move when the boat rocked. Pot of Orion momentarily disappeared, then appeared again. Soon all the winter constellations would be back. Cats running over a bridge in the distance sounded clearly through the cold night air. They were on their way to Kingston, somewhere on the bluffs above over the Hudson River. The boat was berthed here in this tiny creek for a night's rest on the way south. There was not much time. There never is. Actually, didn't start out too bad. Theo Fleury with Kirsty McClellan Day, forward by Wayne Gretzky. Obviously, it's hockey time of the year, and Four Nations has brought that to a fine point. 2009. Fleury, if you don't know who he is, was an all-star. He might even be in the Hall of Fame. If he isn't, he probably should be. He was a hockey player, and he had a great career, but then he sort of kind of spiraled out. And in the end, they found out that he was, as a youth hockey player, victimized by some guy named, what was his name? James. Can't remember his first name. Some creepy James guy who was a coach, and he molested a bunch of players when they were in their teens. So Fleury had a bit of a bad time after that. As a young player in the league, I was lucky to have a captain like Theoren Fleury. I've never played with a more tenacious and determined player. The way he competed night in and night out set the standard for the rest of us to try and match. He gave everything he had every game. I appreciated what he brought to our team, and I appreciated his support now. Jerome McGinley. If you played the game in his era, you've been circled by Theoren Fleury. I've seen his lion-hearted efforts win two kinds of hockey, Stanley Cup and Olympic gold. 25 years of broadcasting NHL playoffs, I still point to the 1991 Battle of Alberta as the most ruthless test ever. Right, you did. We got one more book. Westward. Let's build a wall, bruv. You know you want a wall. There we go. A little wall. Westward. Property of Van Buren Public Schools, High School Library, Belleville, Michigan. Oh, look at this. They're all tripled named. Well, that's fucking brilliant. Oh, they're the terrific triple title series, right? That makes some sense. 1958 by Franklin Watts, Inc. Westward, the long trail west and the men who followed it. Selected by Elizabeth Abel. Illustrated by Leonard Everett Fisher. Fort Catherine. The Pioneers. Anybody recognize any of these names? Grant Form, Wallace Stegner, I recognize him. Francis Parkman sounds familiar. Wagon Wheels, A Wild Strain by Paul Hogan. Again, we have a library pocket, which is always great. Michelle Butler. Penny Davis. Larry Cox. Look at those stamps. I've never seen that on a pocket before. What if they've stamped it every year? Looks like it. I like that. I like it. I like it a lot, bruv. Due date, 1983. All right, what was that other book? Let's go back to this. See if we can find any good diary entries. Oh, buddy, don't honk. Don't honk. Island of Kauai. What the fuck you write about the island of Kauai? Why do I have a feeling that all of his, yeah, I'm right. All of his diaries are from overseas, which is unfortunate. So what's this actually have to do with the Northwoods? Unless he's writing about the Northwoods while he is gone. All right, there we go. The lake must look funny with no rice in front. So you want steel boats hereafter? I don't know, as I blame you. You know, my family has been pretty big the past 3 years. Only this family is all boys. I want to get away by ourselves for a spell. Well, so long as you don't know what sea rations are and don't even ever have to eat any, you will be better off. So on kitchen patrol today, bruv. The mill and the floss. Look at that, now you can finally see the fucking book. Let's see if I can get him to stand up there. There we go. And the Mystic Quest. Famous American Negroes. Let's take a look at, I want to look at, what's her name? Because she is mentioned in this book that I am reading. Where is it? Black No More. Phyllis Whitley. Where is she at? Langston Hughes. What year is this? 40, 54? Phyllis Wheatley. Page 5. Whose poetry George Washington praised. She was a frail mite of a child, dark as chocolate, cute, shy, and rather pretty and exotic in an exotic African way. There was something about her delicate face and bright eyes that appealed to John Wheatley so soon after the sails were lowered on the ship that brought her from Senegal. He brought her as a servant for his wife and their twin son and daughter. The little girl's eyes were wide at the busy wonders of a strange new world as Mr. Whitley led her from the dock through the streets of Boston, but the cobblestones were cold to her bare feet, and the child didn't know where she was going or whether to laugh or cry. What did he get her for? A servant for his wife. John Wheatley was a well-to-do tailor, and he took the youngster to his comfortable home, where she was received with kindness. No one knew how old the girl was, but because she was losing the last of her baby teeth, her mistress thought she must be 6 or 7. Since the child did not know a word of English, and no one in Boston in 1761 could speak Senegalese. Not only the young one's background, but even her name remained unknown. So the Wheatleys called her Phyllis and gave her their last name, Wheatley. Before the girl was 21, this name, Phyllis Wheatley, had become famous throughout the colonies and even in England. This little African slave grew up to become one of the best-known poets of her time. It happened that Phyllis had a gentle mistress who, seeing that she was a bright child, soon taught her to read and write. In those days, in many parts of colonial America, it was against the law and certainly contrary to custom to teach slaves to read and write. Nevertheless, by some good fortune, a number of slaves did learn, and some of them, even before Phyllis had published her poems, became known as poets. A colored woman named Lucy Terry in Deerfield, Massachusetts in 1746 wrote, among other verses, Bar's Fight, a vivid rhymed account of an Indian raid on the town where she lived. Another Negro in bondage, Jupiter Hammond, began publishing poems as broadsides in Queens Village, Long Island in 1760. And 18 years later, he paid tribute to the Boston slave girl, whom he had never met, in his poetical address to Phyllis Wheatley. When the ship with its cargo of slaves, which included the delicate child, whose name was to be Phyllis, dropped anchor in Boston Harbor, the 13 colonies were becoming increasingly resentful of English domination. The soldiers of King George III patrolled the streets of Boston, where Phyllis was in her early teens. In the street where she lived, a group of rebellious citizens clashed with the British soldiers. Among these angry Bostonians that night was a tall Negro seaman named Crispus Attucks. When the Red Cross fired, Crispus Attucks was the first man to fall, shedding his blood for American freedom. His body lay in state in Faneuil Hall, and today there is a monument to his memory in Boston Common. 5 years later, the Revolutionary War began in earnest under the leadership of General George Washington. During the siege of Boston, Phyllis wrote a poem about George Washington, terming him first in peace. Its closing lines are, "Proceed, great chief, with virtue on thy side. Thy every action let the golden guide. A crown, a mansion, and a throne that shine with gold unfading. Washington, be thine." From his encampment, the man who was soon to become the father of his country wrote the young Negro poet a most gracious letter thanking her for the poem. However undeserving I may be of such encomium, and paying tribute to her unusual poetic talent, he closed his letter by saying, If you should ever come to Cambridge or near headquarters, I shall be happy to see a person so favored by the muses, and to whom nature has been so liberal and beneficent in her dispensations. I am with great respect your obedient, humble servant, George Washington. Let's see if we can find a picture of Phyllis. That's her. That's Phyllis, bruv. Phyllis Wheatley, who is mentioned sardonically in this book. The hotel, which is in this book, is called the Phyllis Wheatley, which hey, there may be a Phyllis Wheatley hotel, who knows? In Harlem, I have no clue. Or this book was written in 31, so who knows? Could have been. Well, let's see what else we can go after in this one. Let's read some more about Santeria. New forms in New York. Santeria in the United States. With the advent of the Cuban Revolution and sizable number of Cubans, a sizable number of Cubans, sought refuge in the United States or Latin American countries. From 1959 through 1962, the exodus was composed largely of middle and upper class Cubans hostile. I don't give a shit about the history. I just want to hear about Santeria itself so I can get an idea of what was going on there. The saint of miraculous healer. Conquest cultures, pre-Santeria and early Santeria. When Columbus landed in Cuba, he found the islands already inhabited. The Siboney, a northern Amerindian group, which was slowly being pushed southward by the Arawaks and Caribs, had preceded him there. After discovering Cuba, Spain settled in with a government and a president and a resident labor force. And what the hell is Santeria? Let's get to the gist of it. Let's get to the gist of it. Creole culture itself continued to be shaped by the social relations between the various groupings. The Catholic religion. Unlike Africans, the Spanish were able to import not only their culture, but also their society, the Cuba, though it would undergo modifications in the Cuban context. Curious ritual. It was common in the Cuba of this period for plantation owners to have their sugar estates christened with Catholic rites. In effect, the sugar estate acquired a kind of personality, and many of the estates were named after saints. Through this ritual, the plantation obtained a heavenly patron who would come to its aid, and slavery and profit, if not actually sacrificed, were certainly legitimized through being linked to the major sources of power and tradition in the society. When the new sugar estate had been planted, the buildings necessary to house the slaves, overseers, machinery, draft animals, and so forth, all completed, and the process of sugar production advanced to the point where the sugar cane was ready to be ground. The master of the state arranged for the christening. He engaged a priest to officiate over the process. Like a newborn child, the new estate had to have godparents, and these had to be selected for maximum benefit. Oh my God. Just get to the point. All right, I'll give up. I'm never going to know what Santeria is about. Let's read a little of the Mill and the Floss. Book first, boy and girl. Outside Dorcote Mill, a wide plain where the broadening Floss hurries on between its green banks to the sea, and the loving tide, rushing to meet it, checks its passage with an impetuous embrace. On this mighty tide, the black ships, laden with the fresh-scented fir planks, with rounded sacks of oil-bearing seed, or what the dark glitter of coal, are borne along to the town of St. Oggs, which shows its aged, fluted red roofs and the broad gables of its wharves between the low wooded hill and the river brink, tinging the water with a soft purple hue under the transient glance of this February sun. Far away on each hand stretch the rich pastures and the patches of dark earth, made ready for the seed of broad-leaved green crops, are touched already with the tint of the tender-bladed autumn-sown corn. There is a remnant still of last year's golden clusters of beehive ricks, rising at intervals beyond the hedgerows, and everywhere the hedgerows are studded with trees. The distant ships seem to be lifting their masts and stretching their red-brown sails close among the branches of the spreading ash. Exciting stuff here, too. Yeah, that's it. That's the books. That's going to be all for now. That's all, bros. Yes.